Uh,
You actually crawled through the valley is the best way.
yeah, I
You
crawled through the
stop and
valley. Yeah,
go.
yeah. Drove the
Oh my, the
405
405.
through the 101 and the 10 intersections. It was like
Uh, I see. You enjoy the
that's
best of
why
LA's freeways, the
that's why
greatest
I
hits.
left.
Hmm. Well, we're right at, I have 3:01 on my computer clock, and I'm showing seven of us here. Jeff, would you like to kick it off?
Sure, great. Thanks everybody for
Good.
logging on and joining us. I'm Jeff Ray. So if I have not met you, I look forward to meeting you hopefully in person at in Detroit at NPC. The current chair I took over in January from Steve, who's online, and he can introduce himself. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a sole proprietor. I work for myself, Ray Planning Solutions in Omaha, Nebraska. And have been in private practice for the majority of my 30 plus year career. So, Steve, you want to do it next?
Yeah, I'm Steve Stockdale. On the past chair, I've worked mostly as a transportation planner. Most of my working life in Middle Tennessee, but the last 20 years I've been living in Florida and advocating for bicycle and pedestrian transportation.
Vince?
Jacksonville, which is a lot different from the rest of Florida.
All right, we'll keep going. I'll go next, and then I'd be happy to call on people to go. Vince Cotero, I'm the professional development chair. I'm a sole proprietor from Cape Coral, Florida, and I have a very I call it a niche firm. Expert witness testimony, help clients with policy development, specifically in comprehensive planning and land use matters. And I operate under the name of City Logic. So, Lou, why don't you go next?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Lu Ho, and I'm a basically urban designer since the 90s. I've been in self-consulting business for the last 30 some years. But for the last 20 years, I've been in China for 20 years, but just came back last year. I do urban design mostly, but some planning, architectural work, landscape. Uh, I'm now based in DC, Washington, DC.
Okay, great. I think Corey had to jump off. Um, okay, Corey's our vice chair and operates out of Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Daniel.
So my name is Daniel Skolnick. I'm an AICP, and my company is Planning Consultants of California. We are a boutique land use firm, and we primarily are set up to deal with California's very unique and very fast-moving regulation. And my experience was in municipal consulting and then working for the city of Los Angeles before that for both four of our elected officials as well as our planning department.
Oh, great, welcome. Okay.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Hi everyone, Sarah Chimilak. I'm currently in Denver, Colorado. Um, I've had a pretty crazy career journey. I was a Polk counter and or a county planner in Polk County, Florida. I was a city planner in Irvine, California. I was a planner here in Colorado, and then I moved to the dark side, engineering consulting. Um, Most recently with Olson, who's out of Omaha. Um, but two employee-owned companies let me go in a row for sales and acquisition purposes. So I finally figured I'd go and venture on my own. So I started a company this year. It's me. I'm doing whatever, whoever will pay me, I'll do. But basically municipal planning. So I'm working with San Clemente, California right now. And then, if I could do project management, entitlement for private developers. So I'm trying to grow on both sides and see which one where I should focus. But anyway, thanks for having me. It's I'm new, so
Welcome. I'm glad you're with us.
thanks.
So, as I was saying during our informal conversation before we officially kick the meeting off, we have a monthly conversation, and our webinars are not as frequent. We try to have 4. This year, our first one, we're still working on the date right now. It might be early summer, but we'll make up time later on sustainability and resiliency. And one of our volunteers, Ernie Bauman from South Carolina, a firm called Tool Design, is putting together a national panel on that. So we're really looking forward to it. So I think it'll be worth the wait. Our conversation today was going to be a program to have the state chapter president of Florida, Alara Mills Gutcher, who is a member, talk about the revised community planning assistance team program in Florida, but she got called away to another speaking engagement and she asked us to reschedule. So what the board elected to do today is have a program that they've utilized in the past, and it deals with your thoughts and ideas that we can share with the president, or excuse me, the chair. And this year is Jeff, who succeeded Steve from his 2-year term. As we head into the national conference, very timely. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff if he wants to make any preliminary remarks, and then we can just get right into our conversation. Usually our conversation is very informal. After a presentation, it's Q&A for at least 30 minutes. This one may be even more informal. So Jeff, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Vince. Yeah, so what we're trying to do here is really just have an open forum to say, hey, what issues are you running into in private practice that we can bring up, or maybe just even in planning in general that you want to be brought up to APA leadership. So prior to the conference, if you're not familiar, the division leadership as well as the state chapter leaderships have business meetings all day Friday before the conference starts on Saturday. So right now I'm looking to hear from you as I represent you at those meetings. What are the issues that you are running into or you would like me to express to APA staff or other leaders from other divisions? And I hope all of you are aware that some of the initiatives that we've been working on in the private practice with the risk management policies and guidelines that we're coming up with. So that's working and that's in process. And that's in conjunction with liability insurance and legal review and that type of thing. And so we will have those out this summer. And that's been an initiative that we've been working on for the last about year and a half. With that, I'll start taking questions. Daniel, I see you got your hand raised.
Yes. So Jeff, one of the issues that we have here in California is that the planning profession is not enumerated in our code. So attorneys, accountants, paralegals, architects, engineers, they all have a place in our code, real estate agents and so on. Now, the reason why this is important is because in the public sector, you're okay. You work for a municipality or what have you, and you're working as an employee, no problem. But in the private sector, sometimes you want to have flexibility. You want to work as an independent contractor or join a company as an independent contractor. And because the planning profession is not enumerated in that code, we don't have the same flexibility that other folks in the construction industry who are enumerated do. And that's an issue here. We had an interesting labor dispute a few years back between labor and the rideshare companies. And when they created new tests about employment law, they carved out a number of exemptions for independent contracting, and we weren't there. And so, in order to hire independent contractors, you really can't. What you have to do is you have to subcontract with another company, and that makes things less flexible and onerous for California planning practitioners. It also makes insurance a little bit more difficult to define. I think when you have a clear definition or clear example of what a certain activity is within state code, it makes it easier for insurance companies to understand the motive character of the business and then write a policy accordingly. So I think addressing these issues, these two issues, would be really big in the state.
I should add to what Jeff said before we talk about risk management guidelines and where we are on that with liability insurance, that the division's counsel is, I guess, about a quarter of the way into developing a product. I don't know exactly what the deliverable will be, but it's about the value of planning and to emphasize why planning is needed or what planning contributes to the greater good. And we took a more, as a division, took a more, what do you call it? Pecuniary interest in it. Our perspective was that the value of planning means that planners should make more money. And either way, whether you're talking about it esoterically or in dollars and cents, people have to understand what planners do and why what makes a planner qualified, as opposed to somebody who's nominally a planner or just happens to be related to somebody, or I guess they call it a rainmaker in the engineering business, where they hire somebody because he's retired from a state DOT, and well, he's never been an engineer, so they say, well, he's a planner, and so there's such a it's so broadly defined that it loses. We have trouble sometimes saying why we're worth more than somebody else. Put it that way, and that gets to what you're talking about, Daniel, I think.
Yeah, well, it's for our. So I was speaking more to this specific issue of California's labor law, and the fact that independent contractors in planning are not an option. But I agree with all the statements you've made. I think land use is so complicated in this state, and transportation is so complicated in the state that most folks have, either they're a planner or they're an attorney, or they have a tremendous amount of experience working with the administrative law related to planning, that you can't really just jump in. Like, people will see that you don't know what you're talking about. I don't know if it's easier in other states. So, I mean, I get the point that you're saying. I think, is it New Jersey that has a licensing requirement for planners?
Yeah,
That could be one option. I think, as an AICP, I'll have to say that AICP sets a really good core for the knowledge needed for planning, but it doesn't provide the specified like administrative law associated with the state that you're working in particular the state of California, which has CEQA for environmental review and our own set of regulations, and we have a dramatic set of different changes that have happened at our state level that get more intense as the years progress with our housing crisis. So I definitely do see every point that you've made, and I think I'd add to it, and I think the question is really what the solution is that we should advocate for. Like, that's the question. So I think it gets a little bit challenging when you say, well, let's do state licensing, like real estate agents or like engineers or like architects. Some would argue, well, that's excessive. but I think there maybe needs to be some sort of minimum standard. And if that means that we have two tiers to make it easier to come in when you're new, then so be it. But I don't think that it should be there for the purpose of protection um, of 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 the industry, meaning that a barrier to get in.
Mhm.
But there needs to be an understanding that it is a profession, and there maybe should be certain minimum standards or experience. So perhaps there could be like a planner in training, just like there is an engineer in training or architect in training, as there is in California. Um, and and then maybe there should be some minimum exam. I would say, if we could, I think in New Jersey, if anybody's from New Jersey, knows how it works. My understanding is the ICP exam is not that different than the requirements of the state of New Jersey. It's something of that nature, whereby maybe the association's bars could be applied as a state designation.
There's there was licensing in Michigan, and my understanding is that the pass rate was so low that they stopped it. I mean, apparently qualified planners were not able to get licenses. So, I mean, there's that issue. But we do have AICP certification, and one of our members uh, sort of introduced the concept to me of barriers to entry. You can't have a you can't be worth a certain amount of money unless you can distinguish yourself from people who don't have your qualifications. And he emphasized as a barrier to entry, and this is only for the AICP members, that we have a code of ethics.
Hmm.
And we had a conversation, I think it was in December, legal tips and tricks for planners from someone from the Planning and Law Division. And he pointed out the attorneys have a code of ethics also, but attorneys' code of ethics, and I think architects' code of ethics, your 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 highest obligation or highest level of obligation of an attorney is to his client. And the AICP code of ethics, I think, may be unique among uh, professional codes of ethics, and that we have our highest obligation is to the public interest.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And so, subject to the needs of the client or the jurisdiction that the government that we work for. So that puts us maybe on we call it a higher moral plane, or makes us more godlike, if you will.
Well, I
Um,
wouldn't say that, but
but
Bill, but I do see your point. No, please continue.
well, anyway, I mean, I think that makes us, that may distinguish us from an attorney. And I've dealt with a lot of attorneys who say, I wouldn't say this in front of a member of the Planning and Law Division, but they don't seem to give a damn about the public interest. And that's, and nor should they. They're supposed to be advocating for the client. They're supposed to be up against another advocate for the other side, and then it's supposed to be, uh, the judicial system is sort of based on an adversary, the wisdom of the adversarial process. One guy versus the other
Yeah.
guy, and the good guy wins. So that's not what planning does. We're supposed to be looking at everything and making a decision about what's important. And I think that might give us a leg up on some other professions. The other thing that we've been pushing with guidelines and risk management guidelines and professional liability insurance is that, I wouldn't hire a plumber or an electrician unless he was licensed and also insured because if something goes wrong. And I think if we're responsible for the long-term public interest, then planners should have some means of assuring that they'll be there, when when it's all over. I mean, that, we will, if we're obligated to serve a community
Hmm.
and we go out of business or we leave town, I think that sort of diminishes our value. There has to be a certain impression or understanding of stability in my mind for a planner to be valuable. And then for that reason, the planner should be insured or um, demonstrates some uh, stability, uh, maybe a bank balance or something like that. And just so that the client is comfortable with the planner, that the planner will still be there, when something goes wrong or when something new comes up. I
Hmm.
had a client, uh, the same client for 30 years, and it was, I think there was a lot of value and stability. It's hard to establish that kind of credibility as an individual. And so when I worked at a large firm, they weren't hiring Steve, they were hiring this large firm that's been around for 30 or 40 years. And then I was just a part of that firm, but the stability came from being in a large firm. So how do we replicate that, in small practices like Sarah's? I'm not sure. I'd like, what do you think, Sharon? How do you impress your clients with your that you'll still be there? I guess you put it that way.
I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get there, you know. I'm still working on finding clients. So, but I mean, it is just the reputation that you yourself hold or I hold, for now until I become a business with employees. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I'll worry about longevity once I'm done worrying
Yeah.
about
Well, once,
tomorrow.
yeah, I understand that. I had a
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a client and he hired me because um I was advocating something that was uh, controversial or not popular with the stakeholders, if you will. But so I said something about, well, let's compromise. Let's give the stakeholders what they want. And he said, I didn't hire you to go along with them. I hired you to to be the hero. So I mean, you're kind of stuck there too.
Yeah.
Um,
I
it's
will say, like, even starting the business, getting myself a bank account, I wasn't sure which NAICS code to use. A we're not an architect. Like, we didn't seem to fit into that code of what I am. So I think I chose the right thing, but I don't
Well,
know.
that's
there's
funny.
one for
We
planning offices.
Is there?
Yeah, there is. I
Huh.
can after this conversation, we can connect, and
Okay.
I could send you the next code that I used for government contracting.
Okay. Thanks. I think I
moving
chose, it
from
was like maybe I chose like oh, I guess I see
Yeah,
it now.
yeah. Yeah, afterwards,
Okay.
reach out to me on LinkedIn or what have you,
Okay.
yeah,
or is
I
there a chat? Do we
Yeah,
have a chat?
there's a
yeah,
chat
there's a
on here
chat.
too. Yeah.
I
Okay,
think
I'll send.
maybe.
I'll.
Uh,
Maybe I was more focused on like project management at the time and not
mm.
planning
Mhm.
specifically. Maybe that was my problem. Okay. Yeah.
So, but back to the point about continuity. Um, I don't really see. Well, it depends on what sort of consulting you're doing. So the work that I'm doing is either with another government agency or a nonprofit, or it's with a private client who is looking to work on some sort of land use uh, project. And there's a public record that goes along with what we do. And so everything that we file with the city is there. And interesting enough, because of the requirements from the state of California and the city, like if I talk to an elected official at the state level or at many of our city levels, there's a record due to lobbyist registration.
Hmm.
And so between the record that's public and the lobbyist registration, it makes an imprint in time that tells you what you did at what time and what you submitted at what time, and it can give you a record of what you've done, what you've done. But also, I think in terms of like best practices, it's something I learned from working in a municipal law office, was that the record keeping that we do is very similar to attorneys, and you can simply follow the sort of methodology. So I mean, I think it's when you're a solo practitioner, I think you could simply, and I'm not a solo practitioner, but if you were, I think it's about just record keeping, and you could always say like, this is the handoff. I guess the concern is like, going on vacation and taking a break when you need it and so forth, or some family matter. And I respect that, but I think you can do that too. I think you could always have it on hand.
Yeah,
I,
well, I think it is great to have um, something you can hand off to someone else, put it that way. A deliverable well, in California, it sounds like everything has to follow a certain format, uh, and it's a pretty rigorous set of rules that need to be followed, or standards or practices. Um, Florida is somewhat like that, and
Hmm.
Tennessee is where I came from, where I did most of my work. Um, it it varied widely from one jurisdiction to another. Um, the you've got three or four big cities, then you've got all these growing suburbs. And I looked, and a couple of counties I worked for were on or are the fastest, are on the top 50 list, to put it that way, in Tennessee. And then you've got what do you call it? Places that are never going to grow, and and there's no reason for them to expect it. So it just kind of breaks down into three chunks. But Florida, everybody, it's changed over the last 20 years, but it used to be quite rigorous. You had to do this and you had to do that. It was all subject to state review, and then you had to pass muster with the state. Vince knows those rules a lot better than I do, because he came up with them. I just kind of confronted them late in my career.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting that you're working in the state you are, because it's growing at a good clip, faster than my state. And what's also interesting is that the political philosophy is very different than the political philosophy of California. And I'm curious. So we always hear that there's less regulation in red states, and I'm curious what that does for the business environment, because it's actually it's interesting. So we feel like we're overregulated, right? But we also have structure because of that regulation. And I'm curious, um, are you missing certain regulatory concepts that would actually make work easier?
In a way, it does, I would say. But yeah, I defer to Vince about how planning is done in Florida, because I could have came in as an outsider, and I'm a transportation planner, which is a little different from being a comprehensive planner.
In Florida, when the Growth Management Act was adopted, the second one in 1985, 75 it was adopted, but it made planning optional. And if you did certain things, there were certain incentives to developers, but few and far in between. The long and short of it is, in 85, planning became mandatory, and it was top down. So there certainly was structure from that standpoint, but there were some developers early on that I talked to, and I had gone to one of those communities that Steve identified as, like, suburban to uh, what whatever area, and it was a rural community that was growing north of Tampa. And we talked to some of the developers there, especially the ones from out of state, and they said they thought it was going to bring more order and structure to development. They even made the case and said, this Growth Management Act is very conservative. but a lot of people really didn't look at it that way. But it hung in there for a long time during in the and I'm just saying it because I believe it to be a fact. It's not making a political statement, but during the Rick Scott administration, many of the laws were repealed, and you still have the mandatory comprehensive planning and land development code requirements, but a lot of the information that had to be included in a comprehensive plan was eliminated from state law, but a lot of communities retained it. So every year there are challenges when you go through the legislative session, like the one that just ended. It's more on procedure. It's more on building permits and platting your property and how to develop it. It's not about issues that dominated the comprehensive plan landscape for years, like concurrency. You have to have money to develop. In other words, you can't develop this project unless all of the services are in place concurrent with the impacts, which is where the term came from. Recreation, transportation, fire, police protection, school systems, and all that. The argument has shifted more. Now it's more on speed, get things through, expedite permits.
Hmm.
And that's where I help clients.
Can those be bonded for?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh, can the issue of concurrency in Florida. So, in California, we take fees and exactions for public improvements. I'm curious, in Florida, do you have the option of bonding or paying into
letters of credit?
funds?
I mean,
that's done all the time here with planning, especially. With comprehensive planning, it was done through the budget. The concurrency was solved through the budget. It wasn't like you had to have the money. Like if a road was planned 3 to 5 years out, that met the requirement. Then the law may have changed. It may be 3 years, it may be 5 years, it may be 7 years. The bonding, letters of credit, as I heard Steve just say, those are techniques that are used in platting and subdivision development on a daily basis.
But out of curiosity, so there's many liens that different professions have if payment is not received. So when you're working on a big development like that, obviously we take retainers. However, engineers, architects, and contractors, they can place liens on properties for services that are not paid for. And I was curious, do your states have such options for planners?
We can in Nebraska if you performed a service physically on the site. So if I was actually out and did a physical survey of a land, like I was helping a developer get his platting process and subdivision and zone changes and stuff, and I actually physically went out on site, I could do it that way as well. But if I just did it from my desk, no.
So would that be a planner's lien or a land development lien of sorts, or what would you call that?
It's I think they call it contractor's lien.
Contractor's lien. And I hope that you wouldn't have to do that. It sounds like something to avoid, but
I've only been out on my own for 6 months and I've never done it.
Okay.
Never even thought about it.
May you never have that issue.
Yeah.
That's
two-thirds of
fascinating.
Two-thirds of my clients are municipal clients anyway, so I don't know. They're all exempt from all that anyway. So.
All right. They'll pay eventually, but they'll pay.
That's
90, 180 days. Yeah.
Yes.
I made a small claim. I went to small claims court against, the architect was actually my client, not the developer. And I knew a freelance writer, and he said, well, it's the same thing when if I write something, I can go to small claims court. And I had an agreement in place, and I had proof of the deliverable, and I had proof that the deliverable was used by the client to get, in his application process. So it was pretty open and shut that under the contract that he owed me the money. But he was adamant that that's not how the development business works. And everybody waits for settlement, and then when the settlement comes, then everybody gets paid. I said, well, I had an agreement that said you're going to pay me 30 days after I finish the job. And what happened was that the bailiff or the whoever it is, the process server walked into the lobby of the architect's office and served papers, in front of everybody. And it was, I think I got blacklisted. I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't have done it again.
Hmm. No, that's interesting. So like when do we receive payment in the industry? That's actually really a fascinating point. That what is customary for the rest of the pre-development team, or when is it customary for the pre-development team to receive payment for different uh, portions or different parts of the industry? I imagine it's different for transportation than it is for developments just as land planning, or even just as simple as a tenant change of use situation. It can be different. But that is a good point. It's interesting that it's not standardized in any way. And I'm curious, I mean, do you think it would be beneficial if it was more standardized? Now, again, I'm not like looking to overregulate it, just a point of having a construct with like having a framework help the industry.
Yeah,
Well,
Daniel, I'll
we,
jump in there. I think part of where we, at least Steve and I have had this conversation about where we're kind of going on the risk management piece of it is even trying to get to a point where there may be, not only would we be able to say, hey, here's a number of providers for liability insurance for planners, but then here are some legal expertise that will help you on the planning side as well, and or maybe create a series of templates. Like if you've ever looked on the American Society of Landscape Architects,
Hmm.
they have a set of standard documents and contracts, kind of like AIA does as well.
Right.
And those standard contracts typically spell out how and when you get paid, what type of retainer you put in, and when you do that. Um, so there's some standard language I think that's out there that I think would probably be a much easier way to go from a private practice perspective of saying, okay, here's the language we want to look at. And then if you have a client or municipality that says, no, we only use this standard contract, then you would have a legal review of it to make sure you're protecting your best interest and that it will
I,
will will get you
uh,
paid. I mean, I know some of them like like I'm a sub consultant to an engineering firm and I get paid 30 days after they get paid, but sometimes they don't get paid for 6 months. So it's like, I'm way out there and I'm like, wow, I forgot I had this out here. I mean, thankfully my software continues to let me know every 30 days, like, hey, we're at 180 or wherever we're on there, and I have the right to charge interest beyond 60 days. Um, I don't. I almost always waive it, but at some point, at least I have the right to do that, and it's in a legal document that both of us have signed.
I see. That's actually
yeah.
a very interesting point in terms of standardization. I'm curious, does the American Planning Association have a budget to pay for such a process? It's so reasonable. I'm also a member of the AIA, and the AIA definitely has those documents. They're a little pricey, but they have them, and I know that other industries do that as well. The real estate industry for purchase, sale, and lease. They have a number of standard documents at the state level for their different associations. Does APA have a budget for such work?
Um, that's something we may be working towards
Yeah.
as a
Not
division.
Answer is not at this time.
Okay. I mean,
Oh,
Yeah.
we have a number of wonderful experts in different levels of our association already who, they could help with this project. They should be compensated, of course, but attorneys and so forth who might have some ideas about what those forms could look like. I would think that it wouldn't be national, but it would be like there would be a template that would kind of like look like what it should be, and then there would be little tweaks for the 50 states and territories of the U.S. And I guess
Well,
we have Canadian members too, right?
you could buy the ASLA contract and kind of work on it to where it would be it would cover planning. Years ago, I think my first year as private practice chair, the AIA asked the APA for help with drawing up a standard contract for planning services. And the APA punted it over to me as the chair of the private practice division. And I looked at where they were going with it, and I thought, this is a contract for an architect who wants to call himself a planner, basically. And I said, I don't want to be a party to that. I put it that way. So we kind of parted ways. But yeah, and then what I was working on for free was going to be, was going to cost me, a lot of money if I ever wanted it myself. So but it wasn't. I think it really, to me, it pointed out that architects are uh, a lot different from planners in the sense that they don't try to build a consensus. They go to the owner and they find out what the owner wants, and that's what they go out to get. I mean, the planners can't do that or shouldn't do that, put it that way.
Well, I mean, if it's yeah, I get your point. So as part of current planning, what we do is we have processes that are discretionary, and we become experts in the discretionary process. So, it's all administrative, but when you get to the discretionary actions, that's where our training and experience and expertise as planners really kicks in, and there is a difference there. And so I guess there's two levels. There's if we're working on ministerial or administrative uh, implementation and what that sort of contract would look like. And then there's another level where it's discretionary. And I think of those discretionary actions, there's differences in working on something that's quasi-judicial, where you're talking before, staff or a commission or a board of supervisors or council acting like a judge. And it's, different when you're working on legislative work. Um, so maybe there would be different contracts for that. And I'm not really concerned with engineers or architects doing some of the, having some crossover with our industry, because we have crossover with their industry as well. So if they're working on the administrative um, process that's ministerial, that's fine. But I think we all know that, when you step into the world of discretionary actions, um, you know, the, they're not going to be as comfortable with it because that's where we shine and where we have the experience is working with the public and um, working on legislation and working on those quasi-judicial matters that
Yeah.
take that deep knowledge a planner has.
I'm glad you mentioned that because um, I think back to my days working for the various governments. Most of my career has been in the public sector, and I served as community development director for 5 different jurisdictions in Florida. And every one of them on regulations, we had that conversation. And when it came down to the site development plan, it was a tough discussion because some engineers loved it and some professionals didn't, because everywhere it went, the regulation was changed, mostly for the reason you mentioned, that a site plan would have to be prepared by a professional engineer. They'd have to seal it because it had information on there that they could prepare. You didn't want a planner or an architect telling you, where the pipes were going to go and the width of the pipes and so forth, and the drainage calculations and so forth. And some people just fought back tremendously on that. It didn't mean it wasn't a team effort, but we constantly had conversations tough ones with people from the different professions.
Mhm.
You know, even planners, they would, you know, and I'm a planner, and they kick back and go, "We can do a site plan." I go, you're doing different portions of the site plan. You know, you're and think of it as a series of documents, and that's really, I think, what helped explain it. And some communities now actually call it that. They'll call it a site plan series, like the series and the site plan. One will be actually the master site plan or a concept plan, and a planner or a designer can prepare that. Anybody with those kinds of graphic skills. But when it comes down to the development plan, that's where an engineer has to do it. And then there's a set of elevations that has to be prepared by an architect. So um, everybody got a piece of the pie. So that's how we actually solve the problem. Everybody, you do your own piece where you have expertise, and the ones that need to be sealed by architects and engineers, they're the only ones that can do it. You know, we don't want an urban designer sealing an architectural plan. I believe it's against the law, first of all.
Mhm.
If it's, but you know, and then there's the whole public review of those. Are they available to the public? Don't get me started on that. We don't have enough time for this call, believe me. We had a lawsuit over it once in a community where I worked, and because there were urban designers stealing architects' work, but there were public record. After site plan was approved, they can go in and look at it.
Mhm.
You know, what solved that problem? And I'll just cut right to the chase on that one. What solved that problem was a stamp that we had to prepare at the government level. We just took it upon ourselves to do it because it wouldn't have happened. There was a stamp on it once it was done and said, you know, copies of, you know, the whole legal mumbo jumbo about a copy of this does not give anybody the right to steal the work, that kind of thing. You're at your own risk. It was one of those legal stamps we put together, pretty lengthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
somebody created that. It should be treated as intellectual property.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
To the
that with codes and zoning ordinances though, you can't
oh, that's
copyright
right.
those
Yes.
things.
No, those are government documents. Yes, of course, of course. But you know, I think something was sort of brought up. So, like, what is the work that can't cross over? So, you know, an engineer stamp, an architect stamp, obviously, you know, planners could work as designers to a degree, but we're not gonna ever do the work where a stamped plan is required in current planning. But you know, sort of interesting. So, you know, there was an earlier discussion about the code of ethics and the fact that planners look out for the public good, and then, you know, an attorney is looking out for his client, and we sort of have a different duty. Like the fiduciary duty is, in a sense, to our client and to the public, to be truthful. And I'm curious if maybe it's in the discretionary action that we, or in the public process, where we're building consensus that sets us apart, where, you know, maybe defining our profession could be a way to say, well, you know, this is where it ends in terms of crossover, and this is where a planner takes over.
I gotta find this. I was the organizer for a session at a national planning conference, which is kind of this is supposed to be about the national planning conference, but this is a great conversation. I really appreciate it. Um, but he was a planner, and his essential point that he was trying to make it was he was comparing planners to engineers and architects, and why planners are better, if you will, than engineers and architects. And he just kind of he started off by showing pictures of three or four terrorists like Osama bin Laden. He said, what do these guys have in common? They're all trained as engineers. That took care of the engineering part. And then with the uh, with the architect, he said that there was some recreational development in Colorado, and the architect comes down, with the scroll, from the Mount Sinai or whatever, and said, here's what we're going to do. Well, the hell with that. I mean, he didn't make it to first base. But the planner in the story, went out and, found out what people wanted and he consulted with people and he talked to people and he came up with a consensus and that's what got built. So there's your planner there. And I thought it was very revealing in the sense, how planners are different is that planners, uh, it's sort of baked in that we have to find out what people want before we tell them what they want. What the hell? And
Right.
other
That's what
professionals don't do
that
that.
that's an exciting way to put it.
I'll have to write that down.
Steve,
But
I'm not
it,
an urban designer, so I'd like to speak a little bit about what the urban designer does. Basically, we have this conversation every several years. Every generation was discuss how we define what's the planning, what the planners do. We have this conversation all these years. Since '90s, I started, working on this. Actually, I started this profession in the '80s, but all these years, we've been involved with the conversation like this. It's the reason I choose urban design versus the planning as when I was in school, in my graduate school, was I was thinking, maybe the core areas of planning is still, started with the design, with the spatial uh, designs. We're managing the land in terms of space. So, but gradually I found we are actually only control what's above ground, and anything underground is engineers does better because there's lots of engineering issues we cannot solve. So over the years, in my practice, or I think in general in the professions, uh, because I there's this in the U.S. and in China, in other countries too, in Asian countries mostly. The urban design has basically become a necessary evil in a vision design mostly, because when you really do architectural design, even we can do, but that's only one building or one small area. Uh, but in most cases, what I do is deal with a larger area planning. It's sometimes a larger area for development, sometimes for government managed, development, community development or city development. So sometimes involved with the area of 10 square miles or even more. Uh, so that's what as a tradition. I'm thinking myself as more traditional urban design or planning profession, which is still with the space and especially above ground space. But above ground also physically, but also as economically, cultural, or in all different fields. So
well,
the
and
reason we
with Vince and I are familiar with the concurrency standards, and the concurrency is, do you have enough water? Do you have enough, uh, water treatment capacity, um,
right,
services, and so on and so forth? But a lot of the infrastructure is in terms of quantity, uh, or capacity has to be addressed through the planning process. Where the
right,
pipes go, is
right.
maybe up to an engineer, but the pipes have to carry a certain amount of, a certain volume of liquid, whatever it is.
Yeah, engineers does this also, and sometimes it does better in terms of economic numbers or engineering issues, dealing with those issues. But I think planners dealing with the way of life. How do you live in this area? How do you use these resources like water or other natural resources? So the planners typically have to do with this. Then engineering, they probably go through this all the topography, engineering, structures issues, materials issues. Planners often do not directly deal with that, and we deal with lifestyles and way of life, how we live in this region, how we use this natural resources more intelligently or efficiently. So in a general common sense type of thing.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
hard it's hard to define the core, especially this year's, all different fields step into, because planning involves so many things.
Yeah,
So it's hard.
that's a very good point. Especially the larger the project gets, the more we
Right. Yeah.
globally think about those issues.
Right. Yeah. Well, currently, I mean, since I'm in DC, so I'm involved with
mm,
uh, because the federal government now, uh, you know, uh, try to dispose, I mean, millions, tens of millions square feet of all the office space. They don't need it.
Hmm.
They
all
want to put it in the
right.
market, and we're trying to, work with that to provide a new vision, at the same time help them to to properly, deal with this disposed properties. It's the whole area is like core, the monumental core area is there's the federal buildings is all over, every a single blocks. It's was federal properties. Now they're trying to dump it into the market. They don't need it. So we're trying to deal with that. It's originally was we started with the one building preservation efforts, try to preserve the building. Then we gradually expanded to the whole monumental core as a national security issues comes up, and say those properties, when we dump into the market, we don't know who's going to buy it. We don't want to,
Yeah.
those buildings ended in someone's hands that we don't like, or it causes security issues, so something
Yeah.
like that. So this is a typical urban design. Do like Vance mentioned, some urban designer does the architectural work. That's go back and forth. Some architects do urban design planning work too, because
Yeah.
like engineers, they does this all the suburban planning, all these years since the World War II, the engineers dominates all the, community development issues. Uh,
Yeah.
Planners, architects does not really, uh, have the power to say anything. This is all kind of issues. So it's really issue. I see this all the generations. We try to define what is the planning, what's the core
Yeah.
professional areas that we try to do. There's always new areas coming in because we are so acting like a god, like you said. We almost deal with everything. But what's
Yeah.
our core profession? So when we compare with the architects, AIA, AICP, AICP, as landscape architects. So
Yeah.
they are more defined. They're focused on their own, very defined core area. But planners, we have hard time to really define it. So we
It
need to find our
Yeah.
core areas. And
it
also,
does, yeah, it does make our work more interesting.
right, yeah, I was, over the years, I was thinking maybe we should talk to the lawyers and the politicians, what they value our work most.
Yeah.
And maybe that help us to, we know about ourselves.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, we're about timed out,
What
Vince. I
about
think
time?
we're,
Yeah,
Sorry.
we're right
Yeah,
at right at the
yeah,
end.
it's a good
Want to
conversation.
thank everybody for their
Mhm.
participation.
All right.
One thing,
okay.
Jeff, I'll just throw one thing at you for maybe you can bring up at the conference. I had a good conversation with Megan Stromberg several weeks ago. I think she's the editor in chief of several publications. I asked her about all the different types of publications that APA sends out to everybody. and some of them are repeated, like we have Nexus, Advocate, Interact, the magazine, and so forth. She gave me a very nice response, but I really didn't see any solution in sight. It was just this is really low on the totem pole of things ranked by importance. But I was just very curious about that because the APA has put a lot of money in their branding efforts, and I'm wondering where they're going with all of this. Are they going to come up with a new scheme for one big newsletter per month, or are they going to keep it all spread out like they do now? So just something maybe you can learn from the leadership there.
I do know that, and I just got an email on it, I think even just this morning, that their new digital platform is getting closer. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but it's been under construction for about a year. So for those of us that have been in leadership, it's been painful to try to get information or data back, like where's my monthly budget? And like some months you get it, some months you don't. Where's our monthly roster? All of those kinds of things. So from a management perspective, they've gone through a complete overhaul of their entire system at the APA level. So I will be very happy when it's actually out, and hopefully there's some continuity and it's pared down a little bit, so it's not so haphazard as it was before, where it just felt like all of these pieces had just been continuing to be added on, and we had, I don't know what you call it, like digital sprawl, we'll call it that.
Yeah,
so
digital sprawl. I like that.
That's kind of how it feels. So hopefully we got something unified. Somebody like Luke could come in and go like, "Hey, like no, like let's just pare this down. Here's our core. This is what's we're going to focus on this." So,
right, Jeff, can I raise a real quick question? Because I passed the AICP exam in 2001. But I went to out of country in 2005, and afterwards, for many years, I was a lot of out of contact with APA. I think Stephen, I raised this question before, but I wanted to just ask: is there any way I can, reinstate my
reinstated?
Yeah, I can prove that I've been, in this industry, working on many significant projects all these years and lead a lot of professional activities. But I just, I can pay all the, overdue fees. Also provide the information if that's possible to. Because they asked me to retake the exam. I'm 68.
Oh no.
I couldn't,
You
couldn't
have a
remember
low.
all the little things. There's any way you can do that?
Lou, did they say that at national, or your state or local coordinator said that? I think that's incorrect. I think you can simply pay your back fees and
Right,
continue because you were out of country, right? And then,
right, yeah.
yeah, so I
Well,
don't.
I talked to national APA office by email. I haven't really. I'll try to speak with
That
some of the
Yeah, that
leaders.
doesn't sound quite right. I mean, you were out of the country for how long?
20 years.
20 years, 20 years.
Yeah.
Oh, you were out for 20 years. Oh
Well, I
my.
came back. Well, because the reason was I was not keeping up with it. I In China they don't have
Yeah, it's
a
a
credit
different
card.
system.
Well,
It's a very
they don't
different
have a
system.
credit card. I couldn't pay for it,
Mm.
and over the years, and then I started doing it, but don't have a U.S. credit card anymore. Also, after a few years, I kept paid for the last first 5 or 8 years. Then I kind of lost. Uh, so I wonder if
Yeah.
it's possible to. I think my memberships last
Yeah.
until to, 2013.
Luke, could you put your contact information in the chat, and then I'll look into it and get back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
I'm signing off. I
Thanks, Steve.
enjoyed this conversation. It was different from what I thought it would be, but I think we covered a lot of good topics, and certainly gives me a sense in terms of our risk management guidelines and liability insurance and value of planning, where we need to go with those initiatives. So thank you all very much. Take care.